Hi everyone, my name is Bionic and I'm here to give you some tips on preparing your completed mixes for the mastering process. I hope this helps. Check it out. So I'm going to open my session here in Ableton for my new single Spread My Wings, which is being premiered on Spotify November 16th on Mal Label Music. And as I mixed the elements here, I used Digital 0 as my peak level on my master fader. So I use 0 as my ceiling to make sure I don't ever exceed that overall volume. As I'm mixing, I'm watching for overloads on my master fader, and that helps me determine if I'm getting my overall balance as close to that Digital 0 as I possibly can. Now, once I've gone through my song a couple hundred times and watched my master fader, made sure there was no overloads and that I'm getting as close to that Digital 0 as I can, I'm ready to prepare my files for the mastering process. Now I'm going to save an alternate version of my session that's called Unmastered in the title. That way I have a version where my volumes are as close to 0 as possible, and then I have a version of the session that's strictly for creating the files for mastering. Once I've created my file for mastering for this main version of the song, I'll create another session for every other alternate version of the song: instrumental, show mix, clean version, and so on. Before we prepare our mix to make our mastering file, there are a couple things that we have to consider. Number one, who's going to master your song? This is an important question because it determines a lot about the file format and how you prepare these files for mastering. And how much will it cost? If you have 10 songs for your album and you need show versions, instrumental versions, and clean versions for every one, consider that when factoring in who you choose to do your mastering. The second thing to consider is what process or tools does this mastering facility use, and does that suit your particular style and genre of music? The third factor is what file format do they require? In other words, what bit depth and what sample rate do these files need to be? The last thing to consider is how much headroom to leave on your master fader. There are varying philosophies on this, but generally most mastering engineers are looking to get a file that has between 10 and 12 dB of headroom. The way I like to think about this is if you imagine a pitcher full of numbers, and when the pitcher is full, that represents 0 dB. And 0 dB is the largest number value numerically that the pitcher can hold. So when you're at 0 dB, the pitcher is full, literally, of zeros and ones. And if you send that to a mastering engineer, there's very little they can do to increase the overall volume because there's physically no room for any more numbers to fit in the pitcher, if that makes sense. All digital platforms will accept 24-bit files now, so when you receive your final files from the mastering engineer, they should be 24-bit files at 44.1 kilohertz. A final note here is that you should definitely be recording in your sessions at 24-bit. The pitcher is much larger. 24-bit has 16 million digital levels, and 16-bit only has 65,000. So that's a pretty significant dynamic difference. So stay in the 24-bit realm. So now we know where it's going to get mastered, we know what the file format should be, and we know how much headroom to leave for this particular facility that we're going to send it to. Now we're back in the Ableton session, and we're going to make sure there's no volume fader automation on any of our faders. If there is, we're going to record that audio to another track and permanently record the automation. Now the reason we do this is to prepare for this next step, which is to select all of the tracks and pull down all the faders except the master fader, 10 to 12 dB, depending on what your mastering engineer requires. Check your master fader volume and make sure that your levels are consistent with being 10 to 12 dB quieter than Digital 0. So your levels should be hovering right around -12 or -10. Now we're ready to render or bounce our file in the desired format, and I would make a new folder and name the folder Pre-Masters so they're easy to keep track of and you send the right files for mastering. I hope this was informative. I'm Bionic. Look for my new EP, Animated, coming out November 23rd on Mal Label Music, and look for the single, Spread My Wings, being premiered on Spotify on November 16th. Peace out, y'all.